And here we go. It is the Flyers game day. Jason Myrtetus, Brian Smith. We're brought to you by Betway as the Flyers road trip continues. How about tonight in Dallas? Are you in Dallas?
Yep. We are in Dallas, and it's a bit of a interesting couple of days around here with the weather and all that as it crosses the country. We flew a little later yesterday than we planned, but it's been pretty smooth so far. So we're wrapping up the central time zone part of it tonight and coming back east, and then we'll be into the final week. So it's wrapping up here quick.
Yeah, one more time in the central time zone, though. The final game of the year, of course, 8:30 in Chicago. The return of Carter Hart tonight. That's good news. He's back.
Yeah, that's great news. Whatever had been nailing him is good for him to start, and it's probably good overall for organizationally because they were able to send Samuel Ersson back to Lehigh Valley, where the Phantoms are trying to wrap up a playoff spot. They've got a big weekend ahead, so that let Ers get back to Allentown and kind of get back situated and stuff. Don't have to fly there like the day of a game or anything like that. And so that'll be good. And we'll see where they can go from here. But things are looking good for the Phantoms as far as buttoning up that spot. And a couple of weeks left for them. Carter was going pretty well, full tilt, I think, in practice. First couple of games of this trip, so he looked like he was getting close to being able to come back, and we'll see him tonight.
Important for him, I think, to finish the season not as an injured player, finishing it. I think it's important he's had a great year. I mean, to me, he's the team MVP. He and Konechny are like neck and neck. Who's coaching tonight? Is it Bob Smitty behind the bench tonight? Who's going to be coaching?
not my turn. No.
You get yours in July, Brian.
Exactly. Yes, I get to stand there and run the clock during development camp. Torch is going to run the bench tonight. He's going to be back there. It sounds like maybe the plans have changed a little bit. I don't know for sure. But he was always going to do Boston, and I think the plan was for him to do Chicago. I don't know what the original thought was for tonight, but he'll be back down there tonight, and they'll be going as normal bench wise. The only person I think that's left to get a first shot is Darrell Williams, and I'm sure that's coming up here either Saturday or next Tuesday, possibly, I guess. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, he'll be back down there tonight.
Yeah, road trip continues Saturday in New York against the Islanders, Sunday back home against the Bruins, then the final home game on Tuesday against Columbus before wrapping it up on Thursday in Chicago. Well, I talked to Torts, and one of the big things that him not being on the bench has caused a lot of conjecture. We tackle that. Is Torts moving upstairs to be the president of hockey operations? So let's get to the Flyers head coach right now. He talks about, that role of president of hockey operations and if he has interest in it. And I think you'll find the answer is no. And we talk about a ton of other stuff as Flyers Twitter weighed in and really did the heavy legwork here in conducting this interview. These are pretty much all questions that people submitted to my tweet soliciting for questions for John Tortorella. So here he is, the Flyers head coach, John Tortorella. It is another edition of Hockey and Hounds with Flyers head coach John Tortorella. Torts, how you doing?
Doing okay. Getting ready to go.
I'm going to turn this episode kind of over to some fan questions because I solicited for some on Twitter. And usually on Twitter, you get some mindless stuff, but the fans really kind of stepped up to the plate, about 100 responses and some good questions that I'm going to hit you on since I'm kind of on vacation. So I'll mail it in a little bit. But I'm going to start here because the question that was most prevalent was, are you going to be moving up to the president of hockey operations because you have not been behind the bench?
Absolutely not. I'm behind. It gives me an opportunity. I want to make sure I'm clear. It just gives me an opportunity to allow my coaches to progress as far as being better coaches. Coaches aspire to be head coaches. They do so much work for me as assistant coaches. This gives them an opportunity to experience running a bench in a National Hockey League game and some of the things that come into it different than an assistant. And that's all this is developing. We're trying to develop players. This gives me an opportunity to help coaches develop too.
Does it also kind of, when the lead cat's away, the mice will play? Does it give you kind of a perspective a little bit with you not being there? And, the hammer is ultimately yours.
Yeah, it the perspective it gives me is I like watching how like Rocky went through a process the other night in his game where we played 2 periods that we were not good, and I don't think the effort was there. It allowed him to show his personality. His personality is totally different than Brad Shaw's. Darrell Williams is going to get a game also, a very young coach, younger than these guys. He's going to get an opportunity. It allows them to express themselves, and I think a different voice for the players after a long year. I think it's good, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that's what I see, and it's really given Danny and I a tremendous situation in 2 games, 2 out of the 3, to talk while we're watching our team play. And I think it's been really healthy.
This is a relationship business, and that relationship building is paramount, of course. All right, Torts, this is where we turn it over to the fans. We start with Danny Charlton on Twitter. He says, Torts, what do you see as the biggest challenge moving forward into year 2 of the plan? Is it staying the course with development of certain young, new players? Make another jump? Will the direction or time frame change as well? Thanks.
Yeah. I think I think a little bit of the layout for the second year of this is to continue to develop. I think we've made some great strides with developing of our young players here. I think there's 2 or 3 others in Lehigh that we're interested in, maybe joining in here and see if they can be part of the foundation. But I think an important point here is to add after we subtract. I think I think a few players will not be here that are on the team this year, will not be here next year. So there's your subtraction, opens up slots, and add the right maybe second tier free agent, not a big name, but maybe a character guy, maybe a face-off guy, a penalty killer, those type of players that solidify your lineup, along with the addition of hopefully a healthy Cam Atkinson and Couturier. And we can't forget that. We're hoping they're going to be healthy and they fill a couple of spots. So I think we're going to be younger than this year, but still add in certain spots with some new blood coming in, and hopefully the 2 guys that have been out are healthy and ready to go.
And Torts, you and I have talked about it. You don't want to bring in veteran guys in here that are going to block some of these young guys. You got to still see what more of these guys are all about at the NHL level.
There's no question, and that's what happens when I think you subtract here is it just opens up more room for younger players to develop as a player on the ice and also in the locker room as far as leadership. And this is where we're at. And I think the most important thing is just stay with it. Even if we struggle or we're doing really well, no matter what we're doing, stay with the process that we've kind of talked about here of how we want to go about it here the next few years.
Brings us to our next question, which comes from Mike 5 at Mike KH Hughes. He says, you've said all season that long that the team is building and has a ways to go before getting to where they need to be. But how do you process this with the players? He said, in other words, how do you help proud pro athletes work through the frustrations of not being good enough?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's kind of a tightrope you're walking in, and not telling your team. You don't want your team to hear that they're not good enough, and that's not what we've told them. I guess the best way I can explain this is I've been totally honest right on through here. To the individual player as far as where he stands in the organization, and to the team and our team concept and where we are as a team. And that's not saying we're not good enough. We're in a process of building another team, of rebuilding this team. And I haven't pulled any punches with our group, with our team. But there's been some exciting things that go along with this here. I think we have it back on the tracks. And I think our players feel they have it back on the tracks. And I think they've handled themselves very well in a very difficult time for this organization.
This one, yeah, you did very well. This one comes from me. I feel like for the first time in a number of years that there's almost a checklist of what you're looking for when it comes to players, and they need to meet the requirements of the checklist. Yeah, talent's part of that, but character on and off the ice is part of that. a resiliency in the way you play, honest hockey. I think that those are the things that, because that's the way Danny was as well as a player and a fierce competitor. Is that what you guys are looking for going forward? Are those kind of the top things?
Yeah, what you're talking about here is just being a good pro.
Yeah.
You become a pro, I guess, when you get paid. That's a definition of being a pro, right? But there's so many different things that go into play in what we're trying to build here in Philly. Now other teams, other coaches, other managers may look for different things in where they're at as a team right now. But this is foundational building. That's what we're talking about here, is foundational building. And to me, that's the most important part of getting where you want to be. Yeah, there's going to be some pain when you're building the foundation. But if you do it right early on in these first couple of years, it's not a seesaw going back and forth of what your team is. You get that foundation straightened out, and then you build from there. And that's when you get to the point of maybe looking for that top free agent, when you think you've got your foundation, you've got your cap straightened out, all those things fall into play. And that's when you look for that maybe generational player that can get you over the hump.
Torts, I'm just getting a huge sense of enthusiasm that you have. A lot of people asked the question when I solicited, saying, is this what you expected? Are you enjoying this? And I responded the other day to somebody who said, Torts loves teaching. He's shown more video this year, he's told us, than ever before. But there's a real enthusiasm to what you got going on here.
It's one of the most enjoyable parts for coaches, is the teaching part of it. And I'll layer it this way to you too, Jason. The way we're teaching here, my assistant coaches are doing a lot of the X's and O's on the board, and a lot of that. I'm trying to teach the mind. I'm trying to figure out the mind, which to me is the most interesting part of athletes. It's crazy, some of the situations you get involved in when you test people, or they test you, they come back at you, and you're trying to figure out how far you can push them. Did it too much? Can they handle it, or do they want more? Are they asking for more? All this comes from the mind, and so it's kind of really an interesting dynamic. And we're so fortunate to be involved with such great athletes to go about this business.
Yeah, the mind is I talked about it yesterday, and losing the effect it can have on elite athletes as well. I'm going to combine these two. Joe Mooney tweets in and says, from my viewpoint, Torts, your coaching style has seemed to evolve over the years. What or who has influenced you to change the early Torts into the more patient and reserved version we see today? And Simon Costigan said, when did you first start to understand the power of the psychological side of elite sport, and how has it changed your coaching style? Great question.
Yeah, you know what? I think as all managers, I think as all even employees, whether it be in hockey or in business, if you're not open to listen and evolve, look at our world has evolved. I mean, some of the things going on now, 10 years ago, it was totally opposite, I think.
Yeah.
If you're not willing, and the first point I like to make is I've tried to be a better listener. I haven't mastered that. I readily admit that I have not mastered that, because sometimes my convictions are strong, and I want to make sure I don't lose those too. But listening to the players, they have changed me. I think the most important part of a coach, and especially a head coach, is it's not your game, it's the player's game, and you need to make adaptations to them, and not stick with what you want to do all the time. And it's come that way, Jason, in all pro sports. Players want more say. They want to be in the conversation more, and not just being talked at. They want to be talked with. And I think that's one of the most important things for coaches with today's athletes, is to get that straightened out. And you'll have to make a decision as far as how far that goes, how much conversation that they're going to have, because eventually you have to make a call on decisions regarding your team, or it'll just be running amok. It'll be crazy. So I think that's one of the most important things you have to do as a coach, is make sure you're listening and let them be part and empower them in the conversation.
Yeah, listen, process, and then make the appropriate decisions based on all the facts. Dan Knightley tweets in, he says, what separates the great players from the good players? Torch, you've coached a long time. and you've coached some absolutely great players. I watched your introduction or your speech at Martin St. Louis enshrinement in Tampa, and you said, with his kids there, you said he was a pain in the ass to coach. But that's one of the elements that separates good players from great players.
Yes, and there you're talking about the mind. It's not the skill, it's not the skating, it's the mental toughness that Marty St. Louis brought to us. And this was a young man that was told no, stuck in the minors, had a cup of coffee up in the National Hockey League, sent back to the minors. You're too small. You're not going to be able to play in this league. What does he do? And he still has it as a coach. I've talked to him many times this year. I put it this way: he has a chip on his shoulder down to his ankle, and that is a mental toughness. That is a mental thought that you are not going to tell me I can't do this. And he has abilities. You have to have the abilities to be a Hall of Famer like he is, but his mind was one of the strongest minds I've coached, and he drove me crazy because he challenged me every day, and I thank him every day because he made me a better coach. And I hope it was reciprocal as I was pushing him. Hopefully I helped him along the way as a player.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron. I'm a firm believer in that. Last one from the fans. Anthony Giampaolo tweets and he says, for Torts, did you accomplish what you want this year? We're not done yet, but we're getting close.
Yeah, that's a war. I'll put that as an in-between yes and a no. I think they're, and it's something I'll probably talk about in the off season. I think I failed in certain situations with certain players at certain times. I think there's a lot more to do here organizationally, as far as getting Buddy on the right road is what they're supposed to be doing to help this organization to win, and that's not always on the ice. It's in our office and everything. I as I've said, I think it's too gray. Me personally, I think there's been I'm really happy about some things that I think I've helped with, but I think I failed in certain other spots that I need to be better at. Yeah, I don't want to get into specifics, but I think I'm a tweener there. I'm in between.
Okay. That's not a waffle answer either. I mean, you're going to self-evaluate like everybody else and hold yourself to a high standard, because I've said that you walk around and what you've brought to the organization is you carry a very large mirror and you make people look in it, because you can't hide from what you see. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's important.
I think it's the only way, and not just in my business. If there's no honesty to the people that you're with, and you not being on, and you're not honest with yourself, I just don't think you become a better person. And I think we're always trying to become better people. My job is a guidance counselor, trying to make other people better too. If you're not honest with them, I don't think it's fair to them. I don't think I'm doing my job properly. And Jason, some days I don't like hearing the honesty because it's not that great stuff. But I think I owe it to them. I think that's a huge part of my job.
Yeah, I've heard that from many players that you coach, that they really appreciate the fact that there's no gray area on where they are and how they're performing.